All right, so let's get started. So wow, we have people from Toronto, Florida, all over the place. That's fantastic. Well, I'm based in Los Angeles. My name is Daniel Rbibo. I'm with Arthur J. Gallagher, and I specialize in entertainment insurance. So movies, TV show, Broadway, so live theatrical, special events, things like that. So I've done things for studios, independents, film schools, and pretty much everything in between. So yeah, I've been doing this for about coming up on 19 years. So you've seen a lot of things, you know, whether it's hazardous activities, stunts, pyrotechnics, really bad claims, unfortunately, you know, things like that. So I believe we're going to have a Q&A at the end of the presentation. So we're going to kind of go through everything and go from there. So, you know, hold your questions, gather them, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll do a Q&A. And if I can't get to all the questions, then I'll provide my email address, and you guys can shoot me an email afterwards, and we can have a discussion about anything, you know, project specific or something specific that you have in mind. Anyways, so production insurance 101 in a COVID world. So, you know, production insurance in general is something that most filmmakers aren't very familiar with, especially when you're starting out. Nobody really talks about movie insurance when they talk about making a movie. They talk about, you know, equipment and cast and locations and sets and wardrobes and script, you know, screenwriting and music and sound and post-production. It's very rare, you know, that you see, you know, somebody who's just starting out who's already very familiar with production insurance and what that really does, what it means, what it covers, what it doesn't cover, you know, things like that. And now post-COVID, a lot of things have changed. So we're gonna, you know, start off in just kind of going over production insurance in general, and then we're gonna talk about what has really changed after COVID. So things that you need to know as you guys work on your projects, after you graduate, after you are, you know, ready to get out in the real world and make your films, and you know, what impact that will have on your project. So let's see. So we're going to go over the role of the insurance, production insurance in the filmmaking process. And then we're going to go into the details of what that really means. Like when you talk about insurance, what's covered, what's included in that package, you know, in that general term. And then we'll kind of dive, you know, we'll get a little technical on what the coverages are really for and what like the key elements of the, you know, that insurance package and what they do. And then we'll talk about how COVID-19 impacted the insurance industry. And then we're going to talk something that's going to be more for you know, students and emerging, you know, filmmakers. Talk about safety procedures and loss control, right? So things that you got to be aware of to help make your set very safe, right? And then things to help protect you as a filmmaker, as a producer, so that you don't get taken advantage of by third parties, whether it's a vendor or somebody giving you a location, you know, things like that. Then we're going to talk about short-term policies versus annual policies and when it makes sense to do, you know, either of those. And then what information is needed for you to provide to your broker, to your agent, in order for you to be able to get an insurance quote for your project. So a couple of things, right? So people don't really think about production insurance, but when you go to make your movie, it's of course you say, okay, I need a cert, right? I need a certificate, I need to get gear, I need to get a location, fine. But the truth is that no one is going to be investing in your film. No banks are going to loan you money. No investor is going to say, all right, I'm going to give you $1 million to make your movie until you have production insurance. Because at the end of the day, they need to be protected, right? So there's that element where your financier, your investor is going to say, hey, wait a second, I'm going to give you all this money. I need to make sure that I'm protected because they're the deep pockets, right? That's what's really important. They're not going to go necessarily after just the producer. They're going to go after everybody that they can possibly go after if something goes wrong. And unfortunately, there are, you know, I've seen claims where they literally name anybody and everybody remotely related to a project when something really goes bad. Other reasons, right, to rent gear, use third-party locations, right? So I'm sure, you know, some of you may be familiar with, you know, just issuing a certificate of insurance, you know, evidencing insurance for a film permit or for, you know, use of a venue or a location. and then also to get your gear, right? So you want to rent your trucks, things like that as well. So once you actually make your movie, right, you're going to want to distribute it, you want to sell it. And in order to do that, then they're going to require the distributor, the network, whoever it may be, is going to require what's called Eno Insurance. And then we're going to go into details on what Eno is a little bit down the line. And then lastly, we talked about workers' comp, right? So you want to protect your cast and crew and make sure if somebody gets injured, right, while working on the job, that they're insured and that they can, receive the proper benefits. So it's also to make sure that you as a production company are in compliance with state laws and regulations, right? And to make sure that if something goes wrong, that the people that are working for you have the proper insurance to take care of them. We talked about liability, investors, fantastic. Let's see. So, all right, so here's kind of the basic production insurance package, right? So you have your production package. Your production package is your real special insurance policy that pertains to production insurance. So that covers your cast, right? It covers your negative, including your digitized images, your digital content, your digital media, right? It'll cover your camera, your gear, your equipment, your prop sets, wardrobe, extra expenses, right? So if something, say you're going to shoot in a location and it burns down, and you got to go find another location, but that other location costs double, things like that. It also covers, this will come into the COVID discussion, but civil authority, right? So if your ability to film gets revoked by a civil authority, you have insurance for those extra expenses as a result of having to shut down and to reshoot later on. Your commercial package includes your general liability and your auto liability, right? So for your rental cars and trucks, general liability is bodily injury or property damage to third parties. And we'll go into a couple of claim examples on that down the line. Workers' compensation, right, for your employees. Guild travel accident. So that's normally required as a benefit to any guild members that are flying to your location for filming. Excess or umbrella liability. So what that does is that will increase your limits, right? So if a location says, I need a $5 million certificate, a $5 million policy, then your first general liability will have $1 million limit, and then you'll get 4 million on top. So the 4 million of umbrella goes on top of the 1 million for the primary general liability, and that gives you your 5 million so that you can get to that location. Errors and omissions, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's typically required for distribution, and that protects you for claims arising out of the content of your movie, right? So not the physical movie making process, but from the content, right? So you stole their idea, you stole their script, you stole their title, you used music without permission, things like that. And then also you have other policies that aren't necessarily required for every project, but sometimes, depending on some of the activities. So you have railroads, right? So that comes up a lot in New York. If you want to shoot next to a subway, you need to get what's called a railroad protective policy. Watercraft, if you're using boats, non-known aircraft, right? So you're using helicopter for aerial photography, or you're doing drones, those things. Foreign, right? So if you're going to do something international, so there's special insurance that will extend your coverage abroad. Weather insurance, that has come up more recently. You have, hurricanes right now that's going through New Orleans. So there's hurricane insurance. There's all sorts of special insurances that you can get for weather-specific things, and that typically comes up with hurricanes during hurricane season and in hurricane zones, right? So you're talking about the Gulf, and then the East Coast for a certain amount of space. And then now we have COVID insurance as well. So that is something that is available. It is very expensive, but it's definitely available if you have a big budget and your financier, your investor is really concerned about having a prolonged shutdown as a result, then you could explore getting COVID insurance as well. All right, so we're going to dive into the production package policy and just kind of go over some of the key parts of that package. So on your production package, there's probably anywhere between like 15 to 20 different insurances that are built in and included in that. Normally, those are all in, and if you start taking stuff out, you don't really save any money. If you go the short-term insurance route down the line, we'll talk about this in a couple of slides, that's more a la carte. right? And you can kind of pick and choose what insurances you want. So we'll go into detail there. So production package. So your primary insurance, right, is your cast insurance, right? So say you're filming, you have 10 cast members in your shoot, even if you have 2 cast members in your shoot. But if what happens is one of them gets sick, right? One of them gets sick, forget about COVID, just regular flu, ear infection, whatever. So it covers injury, illness, or death. And now that covered artist shuts you down, right? So they're supposed to film today. You couldn't film because they're sick, right? Now you got to shut down. You got to rework the schedule. You got to extend. You got to add more days. All the extra expenses incurred as a result of that covered artist, right, getting injury, illness, or death, right? So hopefully they don't die, but if they get injured or they get sick, that causes a delay in the production. Those extra expenses will be covered under that section of the policy. But in order to get full cast coverage, you need to get them a medical exam, right? In some cases, the insurance company will allow you to do what's called a statement of health, which is where the artists themselves kind of just fill out some paperwork and check off some boxes saying that they're healthy. But in most cases right now, they got to go to the doctor and they'll perform the medical exam, fill out the paperwork, send it to the broker, and then we get it cleared. An essential element is like the next level up of cast insurance, right? So that's very specific. It requires a lot of more invasive medical testing, right? Blood, urine, EKG, stress test, chest X-ray, other things as well, depending on the situation. The only time you really have an essential element is when you have a contract that says this person is an essential element, right? So say you are working with an A-list actor and you have sales abroad that say, I need to have a, specific person in this movie. That's what all my sales contracts are based on. And if this person is not in the film, once you deliver it, then I can walk away from my contractual obligation, right? So what that does, so now you're saying, all right, essential element, insurance company, in person A, or you can even have 2 or 3, maybe even 4 essential elements, depending on the type of project. So you're saying, all right, this person or these 2 people or whatnot, these are essential elements, and they're going to go through all the exams and everything, get them cleared. Sometimes there's an additional premium, right, to have essential elements above 1, right? So normally 1 is included. And you say, all right, so now if something happens to them, we get to walk away from the picture, right? Great. So now you can abandon the film, you can walk away, and you get all your money back. And the essential element, there's actually certain requirements before that essential element claim is actually processed, right? They have to be down for a certain amount of time. You can't just say, oh, sorry, my essential element has the flu, I want all my money back on the film. It doesn't have to work that way. They have to be like incapacitated for, I believe, 60 or 90 days, depending on which insurance company you work with. So it's pretty significant to have an essential element claim. It's very rare. I have not incurred this in the 19 years that I've been doing this. So it's very rare, but that is one element that you need to take into consideration when you are planning your project and doing your sales and setting that up. So next, these are more basic insurances, right? So your equipment, everybody's familiar. You got to have a certificate that covers the equipment for the rental gear, sound equipment, camera equipment, all of that stuff. Your negative film, that's going to cover you if you have damage. So now it's more like your memory card, right? So say you shot on your digital media and then you went to go back it up and then the file's corrupted for some reason, or the footage didn't save properly or whatnot, then that would be covered under the negative film. You have the extra cost to go and reshoot that content. Faulty stock, right? So if the camera itself is faulty, right? So say the camera was broken or is improperly calibrated, that would result in a claim because now the image is off or it's fuzzy or there's a line somewhere or whatnot, or it's pixelated, then you would have potential coverage under that faulty stock section of the policy. Extra expense, so we kind of talked about this a little bit. So this will reimburse the production company for your extra expenses, right, incurred in completing principal photography as a direct result of damage to or destruction of property to be used in production, right? So you're going to shoot in a house catches on fire, now you got to go to another house. The other house costs more, right? Those extra expenses, that would be covered under this section of the policy, right? So you could have a claim right? So just to take a step back, you could have a claim that triggers multiple parts of the insurance policy, right? You could have extra expense, you can have, civil authority, imminent peril. Sometimes those two kind of work hand in hand, things like that. So you got to be careful when you're submitting the claim to look it over and to really analyze to see how many deductibles are actually going to come into play, right? And see what coverages you have at your disposal. So civil authority, so this is really the big one, and imminent peril. These two coverages, typically it's, your film permit, your ability to film gets revoked, right? So this happened in COVID, right? March, I think it was like March 16th, I think that was the Monday, 2020, where all of the states started shutting down, right? And now all of a sudden, boom, you had all these film permits, everyone's ready to film, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, sorry, everybody go home. Everyone go home. COVID's here. Bye-bye. We're pushing pause. Well, what happens to all the money that you spent, right? You spent all this money setting up that day, planning to shoot, whatnot. So now all of those costs associated with the shutdown would be covered under the civil authority coverage, right? Imminent peril, right? So this is going to protect you, right? So this is a coverage that is meant to protect you as human beings, right? And property, right? So what that means is, so the example is that, like, the hurricane is coming, you have the ability to leave. Like, you don't need to wait for the hurricane to be there, right? In order for you to have a covered claim. It's like, okay, we know it's coming. We're going to leave. We're going to evacuate. We're going to be safe. We're going to protect our persons and property, right? But we still have a valid claim because we had to leave because of the hurricane, right? So that's just one example. Of course, in that case, you would have had that hurricane insurance as well. But similarly with COVID, a lot of insurance companies looked at either civil authority or imminent peril if people shut down preemptively, right, before their film permit was revoked. They were looking at and exploring if there's potential coverage under imminent peril because you're trying to protect people from getting sick, right? So that was one of the coverages that was triggered a lot back last year. Ingress, egress, right? So I had a claim one time where somebody was filming on, I think it was in a vineyard, right? Vineyard, orchard, something like that. And they had like one little narrow bridge that got to the main home and to the property. And what happened was that there was a flood and that bridge was, covered in water. And there's nothing wrong with the house, right? So there's no extra expense there because there's no damage to the house or the facilities. You just couldn't get there. And then if you got there, you couldn't leave, right? So that's where ingress and egress coverage comes into place, right? So it's like, I want to film there, but my access to that location is has been denied. It's unavailable because of whether it's a flood or any other situation. That would be that coverage, right? So I also had I'm in California, Southern California, so we have a lot of wildfires, right? So we had somebody shooting at a ranch up in a mountainside, and there was a mountain fire. There was a wildfire up higher up on the mountains, and the fire department comes in and shuts down all access to the mountain, right? So even though that ranch at the base, nothing wrong with it, they couldn't access it. So you got, in that case, you have an ingress egress type of claim. Lastly, for what we're going to cover on the production package, there's definitely more coverages, but this is going to kind of sum it up a little bit so we can move on to the other stuff. We have prop sets and wardrobe, right, which is pretty self-explanatory. It insures damage to prop sets and wardrobe. And then you have third-party property damage. So third-party property damage is very similar to general liability, but there's two distinct differences, right? So third-party property damage covers property damage that belongs to third parties, right? So somebody gives you property, right? So maybe it's a house or whatever, and that is in your care, custody, or control, right? It's in your active possession. It is in your care, custody, control. So the example that I typically use when trying to explain the difference between third-party property damage and general liability is if you're shooting in a restaurant, like at the bottom of a building, right? You see office buildings and there's restaurants at the bottom. If you're filming, you get permission to film in that building, in that restaurant, you lock the doors, the whole place is yours. That restaurant is in your care, custody, and control. You control access in and out, and nobody goes in, nobody goes out. It's your closed set, right? If you start a fire there, right? So say there's a fire, and now that fire rises up in the building, right? Second story, third story, whatnot. The damage above you, right, to all those other floors, that would be a general liability claim because that part of the building is not in your care, custody, or control. So you kind of have two elements of the claim at once, right? So you had one fire, but then it triggered two different policies, that general liability for the top, and then the third-party property damage for the restaurant, the part that was in your care, custody, and control. See something. Okay. Next. All right, workers' comp, right? So now a lot of times it was very popular a couple of years ago to just call everybody an independent contractor, right? It's cheaper, easier. Here's a check, here's some cash, working for free, whatnot, right? And that's not really okay anymore. It used to be, you know, kind of common practice in the industry. Everybody's an independent contractor, and what was happening is that people were getting injured, and there was no insurance, and it caused for some legislatures to pass. I believe there's some in California, I think in New York as well, where they re-identified, you know, an employee versus independent contractor. So a lot of times for workers' comp, when you're in a production, you use a payroll company, and that payroll service will provide you with workers' comp for everybody that's paid through the payroll company, right? If you're not, and they truly are an independent contractor and you're paying a loan out, right, and they have their own insurance, or they have a contract saying, I'm not required to have insurance, you could look at it that way, but we would still recommend that you get workers' compensation for even loan outs and independents, even if they say that they're not required to have it, or if they say they have it but haven't provided you with evidence of it yet, just to make sure that you are safe and protected. There's, you know, a couple of rules, you know, the test, right, that we use when talking about employees versus independent contractor, right? So you say, all right, does independent contractor, whose schedule are they working on? Whose equipment? Are they getting benefits? Are they paying taxes? You know, can they work on multiple jobs at once? When you're talking about somebody working on your film, on your project, it's normally on your schedule, right? The producer, the director, you guys put together the schedule. They got to show up. You have a call time. They got to set up the, you know, the location, the sets, whatnot, the equipment. So you can't just look at, oh, I'm cutting them a check. Well, you can't just do that. You have to look at all the other elements of it. You know, you're telling them when to work, where to work. Maybe you're giving them the tools. Maybe they have the tools. Don't know. But those are just a couple elements. And a lot of times that if somebody does get injured, they're going to rule in favor of the employee. That's just how it is. Until, you know, so you definitely want to be very cautious with that. A lot of questions came up last year where we had clients that had employees that used to come to the office, but the office was shut down, so now they start working remotely, right? So you can still get workers' comp for them. They're working from home. That's not a problem. Even if they moved, you know, from out of, from, you know, in-state, maybe they're in New York and now they go work in another state. They work in Jersey, Connecticut, whatever. You could definitely have that updated to make sure that they're covered by workers' comp in their other states, wherever they work when they're working remotely. There are a lot of questions about what happens if an employee gets COVID-19, and each state, I believe, has different rules as to how they classify that and say, okay, is it really a workers' comp claim? Is it not? So you probably have to, you know, dig a little deeper in your specific state to see if a COVID-19 claim would be covered as workers' comp. So you got to kind of be careful about that. So now we're going to talk about how COVID-19 impacted the industry, and we're going to talk about how that impacted the cost of insurance, how it was, and how it is currently. So there were a lot of claims, right? You probably saw on the news business interruption insurance, event cancellation insurance. There are different terminologies for these types of claims, right? So extra expenses as a result of a shutdown, right? So in production, there was estimated over like a 1.5 billion. I've seen numbers even up to 8 billion when you take into like delays in the Olympics and what was it? All these special events, all the concerts and live events, right? So when you take a lot of the entertainment world and you kind of expand that out to live events and concerts and Broadway and all these other things, that number really gets high, right? Historically, on an annual basis, you probably have somewhere between $300 million and $400 million of claims. And now you're like, I think, $1.5 to $8 billion, which is insane. So no, I'm sorry, the 300 million is how much annual premium they collect, right? So if you're doing all these claims, you need a lot of years of annual premiums to make up, just the impact that COVID has had on the industry. And normally you're operating at a normal loss ratio, not something extreme like this. So you are never going to be at $300 million of annual premiums with zero claims. There's always going to be claims. So it's actually going to take, a lot longer to recoup all of the losses, incurred as a result of COVID. So the real difference between production insurance and general business insurance is the term direct physical loss, right? Direct physical loss, that's very important. Most businesses, right, property insurance, general business insurance, they require what's called direct physical loss to their property in order for that to trigger their claim, to get their claim covered, right? So our policies, production insurance under civil authority and imminent peril, we don't need direct physical loss. So just the act of shutting down alone is enough to trigger coverage, right? Whether it's under civil authority, imminent peril, it all depends on the facts of the claim. But we did not have that direct physical loss threshold that we needed to get in order for our claim to be covered. So you really had a really large impact in the entertainment insurance industry. So out of the 5 insurance underwriters that wrote, the vast majority of entertainment insurance, a lot of them paid a lot of claims, like a lot of claims. So let's see. So as a result, so the insurance companies, right? So a couple of them said, all right, guys, we're going to push pause. We're not going to write Broadway insurance anymore. We took too big of a hit for COVID. We're going to kind of relax on that. Others said, okay, I'm not doing big films anymore. So I only want movies with budgets less than $5 million. So now every time, you only started, the industry was very small, right? So you only have maybe 5 or 6 insurance companies that would give you a quote on production insurance to start with. So now you take one that says, I only want to do small stuff. You take another one that's not doing live theatrical. You take another one that says, I only want to do big things, right? I don't want to do small stuff. So now you're really dividing up the marketplace. So depending on the size of your project and the description of your project, you may only have 1 or 2 insurance companies bidding on your project. Whereas in 2019, right, pre-COVID, you'd have 3 or 4 bids for that project, right? So the more competition, the lower the pricing. Now, less competition, pricing has anywhere from doubled to 2.5 times the rates of what they were in 2019. So, and in addition to that, right, you have conservative underwriting. They are looking at all the details. They're asking a lot more questions. If there's anything remotely hazardous or stunts or anything risky, rates are going to go up higher. Deductibles are going to go up higher. And things like that. They're going to want to know about your COVID safety protocols. Currently, if you get a quote for production insurance, it excludes coverage for COVID, period, right? But still, they want to know, what are you doing? Do you have your COVID safety officer? What are the protocols? Do you have zone A and zone B, right? So your primary cast is in A, and then B is the crew, and nobody kind of mixes, right, to minimize any potential risks of exposure, right? So we talked about this a little bit, right? So you can have higher deductibles. Some insurance companies are not even offering civil authority or imminent peril anymore. You have COVID-19 exclusions, you have virus and bacteria exclusions, and you have also what's called a communicable disease exclusion, which is a little bit broader and typically put on a general liability policy. So COVID insurance, there are options for it, right? So you could go out and buy it. You could cover your cast, you could get civil authority, COVID and imminent peril COVID coverage. The cost is going to range depending on where you're shooting, how long you're shooting, how many people are on the cast and crew. They want to know a lot of information. But right now, I think rates are around I think it's about 7.5% for your limit, right? So say for $1 million, you're talking about $75,000 for $1 million of coverage. And then you're gonna have a deductible of maybe 1 day or 2 days worth of shooting costs. Very expensive, so gotta be careful. So let's talk a little bit about projects and how you handle stunts and hazardous activities on your projects, right? So one, if you do have a lot of stunts, right, that's gonna be a question your broker is gonna ask you. They're gonna say, hey, you have any stunts or hazardous activity? Yes, I do. Great, give me a list. And then give me the name of your stunt coordinator and the contact information. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna coordinate a phone call with the insurance company's loss control and the stunt coordinator and maybe a pyro coordinator, right, if you have a lot of pyro. And we're all going to talk about, right, what are you doing and how are you doing it, right? Are you cheating the shots? Are you really doing it in post? What kind of pyros, right? We had an issue yesterday. Somebody was doing paddleboarding on a river. They want to make sure that there's, lifeguards and flotation devices. And, in some cases, if you're in the ocean, they want to see, is there boats, outside of the, camera view, support boats and, things like that. If there's horseback riding, what's the experience of the rider? Are you using a stunt double? How fast are they going? Are they trotting? Are they galloping? They're going to ask you a lot of questions, but in the end, they're going to help guide you to do your shoot in a very safe way, right? It's very rare for an insurance company to say, you cannot do this. We will not insure this. They will try to find a way to work with you and to make sure that you can get the shot you want, but do it in a very safe manner. So another thing is, right, so that's one thing by just doing, stunts and hazardous activity. So another thing, right, so when you're making a project, you're doing a film, right? You're doing it, whether it's a short or a documentary or a feature or TV series, whatever it is, there's just kind of a couple of things that you always want to do, right? When you get equipment, test the equipment, make sure it's working before you leave the vendor. Because after you leave and something goes wrong and you call the vendor, oh, sorry, it was working fine when I gave it to you, right? And now you're responsible for it, right? You definitely want to, when you get a location, you definitely want to video it, like do a walkthrough with the owner or the property manager, right? And when you leave, do a walkthrough, right? And then you can see exactly, what damage did you cause, what was already there, right? A lot of times when, you have a property owner and they see a student, right, saying, hey, I want to use your house. Like, yeah, sure, go for it. And they say, right, but I need insurance, right? They want to use that, potentially as an opportunity to, remodel their house, right? So, you scratch one wall, that you got to paint the whole room because you can't just paint one wall because it's not going to match, right? Or if you scratch the parquet floor in the foyer, you got to, do the parquet in the whole house because it's not going to match, right? So there's things that you got to be careful of, right? If there's ever somebody who's really eager to give you their house, right, just be a little wary of it and make sure you do the walkthrough, make sure you film everything so that if they come up, to you afterwards, say, wait a second, there's a scratch here, you dented this, you damaged this or whatever, you can go back and say, hey, here's the film. It was already damaged, when we got there. Same thing when you do rental cars and rental trucks, right? You do the walkthrough with the rental car company, any dings or dents or scratches or anything like that, so that they don't hit you up, for an insurance claim afterwards, after you, drop it off. So also another thing, right? Insurance companies are really big on this, right? Do not leave gear in cars, right? Some insurance companies have what's called an unattended vehicle exclusion. So what that means is that if you have a claim arising out of equipment theft, property theft, damage, whatnot, that from equipment that was left in a car that was unattended, right? Just like it says, unattended vehicle exclusion, that's not going to be covered. That's all on you. So that's a big problem, right? So you definitely don't want to do that. Lastly, you want to talk about set safety, right? Don't cut corners. Make sure you're safe. Make sure you have all the proper, safety protocols in place. We've heard of horrible stories of people getting killed because producers try to save some money. They don't get the right permits. They don't get the right safety people in place or whatnot. They try to cheat a shot or try to get a shot off, just quickly and cheaply without following the proper safety protocol. So don't do it. It's not worth it. People go to jail and people die, and you got to be careful. So. Cost. Oof. So this is fun. So insurance historically, right, pre-COVID, you would budget, because I get this question all the time. How much for insurance? I'm working on a budget. How much for insurance, right? It's going to vary, but the rule of thumb is 1% of your gross production cost, right? That's what GPC stands for, gross production cost. So your gross budget at the bottom says grand total. Don't take out money for the incentive. Don't take out money for the rebates, because you still got to spend all that money before you get that rebate back. So your insurance is going to be based on the grand total gross production cost and roughly around 1% pre-COVID. Now that's jumped about 1.5 to 2% of your gross production cost. So you got to plan accordingly. You got to budget properly. And that goes with saying, if you're doing a $50,000 shoot, you may get a $5,000 policy, but it's probably going to be short term, and you're probably going to just pick up a couple of coverages. If you're doing a project, over $1 million, $2 million in budget, then you're probably going to be at that 1.5, 2% range of the gross for the full package. So general liability, auto, maybe some umbrella, the production insurance, and even Eno in many cases. So right now, so we're back up to 1.5, 2%. For films, budgets under 5 million, you probably have 2 insurance companies that are going to quote it for you. Films over 5 million, you have 3 carriers that are going to quote it for you. Policies are more expensive, deductibles are higher. It's a little bit challenging, but we get the job done, and we are able to get quotes from most of our clients, pretty easily. So short-term policies, right? So if you're doing a really micro budget, so anything under like $500,000 and a short shoot schedule, right? So you're shooting for 7 days, 10 days, 12 days. That's probably the only time that I would recommend getting a short-term policy. Unless you say, Daniel, I have $2,000 for insurance. That's it. What can I get? And then we'll point you to, a short-term policy that maybe just gets you some liability coverage or some equipment coverage or something like that. But like I said before, it's a la carte, and you get to kind of pick and choose what you want. And that it's the cheapest of all the options, but it's not really ideal because you are missing out on a lot of insurances that do offer some significant coverage for you. But if you don't have the money for it, then what are you going to do? You do the best you can with what you have. All right. So before we hop into this, I want to talk about Eno Insurance a little bit, that we kind of mentioned earlier on in the presentation. So Eno stands for errors and omissions, right? So all the insurance that we've talked about up until now talks about the physical movie making process, right? I damaged this equipment, I damaged a property, I got into a car accident, a cast member got sick, workers' comp, somebody physically, got injured. Errors and omissions is about the content, right? It's about getting the proper rights, releases for music, film, images, advertising, whatnot, the title, right? I can't go and make a movie called Star Wars, right? I'll probably get a nice letter from a studio saying, sorry, buddy, you can't do that, right? So that's really what that covers. That's why when you distribute it or when you sell it, your sales agent is going to want to have Eno Insurance. Your distributors are going to require Eno, because they don't want to get on a hook, right? Say you stole somebody's idea and then you sold it to them, and now they're showing it. They're going to get sued, right? And they're going to want to be added onto your Eno policy to protect them. So that's really Eno in a nutshell. A lot of times when you're an emerging independent film producer, you typically wait until you sell your film or get it into a festival before getting Eno, because you typically want to save on the cost for that. Premiums start anywhere between $3,000 to $4,000 for a policy, and it goes up from there depending on the content, right? If it's controversial or not controversial, and then the limits of insurance. So now we say, all right, Daniel, great, thanks so much. So much information on production insurance. You've been talking about it for 45 minutes. What next? How do I get a quote? I have a project, I'm working on something. So here's typically what we need, right? Script, schedule, and budget. It doesn't have to be the locked one, right? We all know things are fluctuating, right? The budget's fluctuating, the schedule is fluctuating, maybe the script, maybe go through another rewrite, draft, or whatever. You have your basic idea, you're 30 days out, you're 60 days out from the start of principal photography. You have a really good idea of where your budget's going to come in, what your schedule is going to look like. Maybe the dates are going to move off, but you're going to be locked in at 15 days of shooting or 30 days of shooting. We need to know when and where, right? We need to know stunts and hazard activity, and if you already have any cast lined up, right? So do you have anybody who's over the age of 65, which tends to be a concern nowadays, right? That's a little bit more challenging. You have any minors? You have any lead cast that have historical issues, right? So whether they've had past cast claims or they have substance abuse issues or anything like that, we would want to know that as well. So that's really it to get us started. You know, just give us a name and address of a production company, and these items over here, we can get you a quote. You know, typically between 24 and 48 hours, if everything looks okay. So there we go. That seems like it. We got a bunch of questions. We have about 15 minutes left. So hold on, let me take a look at this. Q&A. So somebody asked a question about is extra expense insurance related to principal photography only? Well, not necessarily, right? Because you could be prepping a location before you start principal, and then something could happen to it, which will cause you to leave that location and have to go prep another location. So you still have extra expense coverage for things during pre-production as well. So that's really easy there. Next question. Is production insurance something that a producer should get for the film, for herself, or the film companies involved? Okay, who pays a premium? Does coverage then stop once a film project is distributed? All right, so here's how it works, right? So you typically get the insurance for the production company.
This is the top result.
Whoop. Sorry about that. The production company and its employees are covered under the policy. And then you add additional insureds, right? So financiers, investors, even yourself as an individual, if you're not the managing member of the company, right? You all get added under the same policy. The policy runs for 1 year, 12 months. So it typically covers you for prep, principal, and post, right? And then your E&O policy will run typically 3 years, right? Because when you distribute it, by the time you close your distribution deals and then actually get it distributed, you know, it could be a couple of years. And once it's disseminated and distributed, then that coverage is going to be in place even after the policy expires. So that's a little bit more technical. We can talk about that on another time. So yeah, let's see. What else do we got? At what scale? So we have a question from Aiden. Let's see. At what scale does a movie require insurance? All these independent films entered into a film festival, Sundance, are they insured while being produced? Do they require to be insured to submit their films or to get distribution? So it really all depends, right? So you want to insure every project that you make, right? Because you need to get gear, so you're going to need to get a certificate. You need to protect yourself from liabilities, depending on the budget and whatnot. And you need workers' comp to, you know, ensure your would like to ensure, you know, to protect the cast and crew. So you really need to have insurance to, you know, make sure that you're doing it right and that you're properly protected. So it says where to cut corners as a young filmmaker and where not to, right? So, you know, you look at your project, right? If you're doing a short film and say, okay, I'm doing a 2-day shoot, right? When you're doing a 2-day shoot or a 1-day shoot and you only have some equipment exposure, maybe, you know, you can really get a short-term policy and then kind of pick and choose, you know, what coverages you could really afford, right? And you kind of look and talk about the specific project, you know, workers' comp. Someone's working for 1 day, you're probably safe. If it's, you know, they're an independent contractor, they're there for a day, that's it, in and out. You know, you may still want to get workers' comp. It really all depends. So let's see, what's next? With freelance videography services becoming more popular, what does production insurance look like when it's just you as the crew? So that's interesting, right? So if it's just you, one-man person with a video camera, right, you're just going to want to have some basic general liability. If you're a sole proprietor, right, I do not believe, at least in the state of California, you're not required to have workers' compensation. If it's your own gear, then you could choose to, you know, insure your gear or not. But that's really it. You're not really too concerned about like extra expense and damage to third party, you know, property, because you're being hired as an individual with your camera. You go, you shoot, and you leave, right? So it's pretty cookie cutter and pretty easy. Next question. Using animals in a production. So yeah, so you can get animal insurance, right, included in your production package policy. You just need to let us know. Let your broker know. You're shooting on a farm. There's gonna be cows, pigs, chickens, whatever, horses, and we just let the underwriter know, and we get it cleared. If you're using them in the movie, like you have trained dogs, right, and like, all right, this dog is like the main dog in this movie, right? They're gonna ask you more questions, right? Do you have a backup dog, right? What happens if the dog gets sick? Are you gonna shut down, right? Do we need, how are we covering the animal, right? So yes, you can get it covered, not a problem. They're just gonna ask you some more questions about it. Another question, hold on, let's see, where are we? What would be the best advice that you can give to a young person who wants to work in production? Thanks in advance. Really, it's just get in, right? Get in, start as a PA, start as a production coordinator, and just learn, right? So it's challenging to get your foot in the door, but once you do a lot of hard work, and eventually you kind of figure out where you want to end up, within the production company, within the entertainment world, right? Do you want to become a director, a producer, DP, whatever? So that's really it. How does production insurance change for documentaries? So documentaries are actually a lot easier to insure because you typically don't have cast insurance, and your schedule is pretty flexible, right? And it's small crews, you go around, you interview people, you shoot some content, whatever. And if something happens, if there's a delay or whatever, like you're not shutting down, you're just gonna go back next week or whatever. And the budgets for a documentary are typically smaller. So the rates of insurance are cheaper, and your package is gonna look a little bit different, than your like feature film type of insurance package. With the insurance company, let's see, hold on. Student filmmaker, the school provides basic coverage for damage to locations. I need to create a business entity to cover other items. You don't need to create a business entity. It's the whole purpose of creating a business entity is to protect you from liabilities, right? So you create an LLC to protect yourself, right? And then also the contracts that you're going to be going into for locations, for equipment, for other vendors are going to be done through your LLC, through your company. If you don't have one, then just do it through yourself as an individual, but now you're exposing yourself personally, for any liabilities associated with that. Let's see, what's next? Will the insurance company lower rates if the production shows extensive risk assessment and measures to minimize risks, even using an outside risk management company? The answer is yes. That's actually a very good question. Yes, because so a lot of times the insurance company reviews looks at the script, looks at the stunt breakdown. If you show that, they'll say, okay, Daniel, here's the quote. But if we have a good call with loss control and the stunt coordinator and the pyro coordinator and everything's being done like, top of the line, they'll say, okay, we can knock off, a certain percentage off of the rate and save you on the premium. So sometimes if you do have a very action intense, a lot of stunts, a lot of hazardous activities, sometimes it makes sense to really invest in a really good coordinator. I've never seen, not never, but it's very rare for independent film, especially low budget, to hire an outside risk assessment company, because the insurance company has a loss control person on staff and they're available. Once you buy insurance with them, they're available because now you have a partnership, right? Where they don't want you to have claims. You want to make sure everybody's safe. So you guys are going to work together. And these people have, 20, 30 years of, film production experience, and they can advise you on how to do things safely. So, but the answer is yes. If you have good qualified individuals, you will potentially save some money on that premium. Should one be concerned in getting production insurance if she or he is a music artist shooting music videos? So music videos are interesting, right? It all depends on what kind of music videos. If you're just doing one music video, low budget, it's fine. You get a short-term policy. But then you have sometimes, like a hip hop video, right? Where you have Lamborghinis, you have jewelry, you have, big sets, or you have a bunch of people driving very expensive cars that are rented, or maybe you're putting a camera on a very expensive car or whatnot. In those cases, you're going to want to know, you're going to want to get more substantial insurance, right? Because you have a greater exposure there. But yeah, shooting music videos, what you could do is you could say, all right, I'm going to make, instead of just buying insurance for that one music video, it'll be more cost effective if you say do 10 or 12 or 20 throughout the year. You get an annual policy to cover all of those shoots at once, not buy them piece by piece. So that's something that we could always discuss at another time as well. So let's see, I talked about documentaries. How do you see, this is from Colleen, how do you see the forecast of the production insurance landscape going forward as new COVID variants emerge and the large backlog of projects that have yet to be released, currently on hiatus or have yet to begin production? Very good question. Right now, you see, the thing with COVID is that it came out of nowhere, right? Nobody knew how big, what kind of impact it was going to have in the world, right? Literally shut down the world, and production along with it. Now that underwriters have been able to update their policies, exclude coverage for it, right? They're offering insurance because they're not, if there's another shutdown, if there's another pandemic, they're not going to be on the hook for it. So they are still issuing insurance. I don't see the premiums going down anytime soon back to pre-COVID levels. They have at least a couple of years, in my personal opinion, to make up from all those claims that they paid, and that's really it. So I don't think production insurance is going to be an issue. Whether or not you're allowed to work, if there's a new variant, if there's more shutdowns, then that's probably going to be your biggest hurdle. But besides that, I think you're going to be okay. How do independent filmmakers obtain production insurance when first starting out in the industry? What are steps to obtaining insurance, even if you're just starting out? This is from Hilaria. So really, you reach out to your broker, you give me a call, you give whoever you've been working with a call and say, hey, I'm making a movie. I got my first project coming up. What do I do? And then we talk about it, right? Say, okay, do you have any employees? Do you need workers' comp? Are you a sole proprietor? Do you own equipment? Are you renting all your equipment? We ask you a bunch of questions, and we try to get you a small package off the start, and what makes sense and what you can afford. And we go from there. Let's see. I'm exploring a documentary with a $400,000 budget. This question is from Caroline. What insurance firms would you recommend would take this on? We would be happy to help you. It's it's a low budget, but we're always here to help everybody and anybody we can. So you can definitely reach out to us, anyone at Gallagher. You have my information on the screen, and we'll help you get that taken care of. That should not be a problem. So let's see what else. If you do a la carte, which options inclusions do you think are absolutely necessary for small budget films? Oh, see, that's really tough. It's all about what can you afford, right? So that question really is tricky, because it's all going to be based on the certain circumstances of that specific project. Are you shooting for 2 days? Are you shooting for 30 days? It's going to vary. What's the budget? So we would have to explore that on a case-by-case basis. Do you need E&O prior to filming, or can you get it after filming? Most of the time, right, we advise our clients to get E&O before the start of principal photography. A couple reasons being, right, you can have an E&O claim during principal, right? You can have an E&O claim even during pre-production. You do a press release saying, hey, this artist, this A-list actor is going to be on our film, and somebody says, wait a second, I pitched you that movie. That was my idea. You said you didn't like it. Now you're going to go make it, right? So they could sue you, and before you even started filming. So it's always recommended that you get it before the start of principal photography. But oftentimes when you don't even know if it's going to get distributed, maybe you're hoping to get into a festival, you're very limited on funds, that you wait until you have a better idea of what you're going to do with the actual movie at the end of the day, and then you buy the insurance at that time. So do I have a book I can purchase? No, I do not have a book, but thank you for asking. Let's see, if you have questions, always feel free to reach out, shoot me an email. I'm pretty good with answering, questions. I kind of work all the time. So just if something specific comes up, you have a quick question, always here to talk it through with you as well. Let's see, we are wrapping up an hour, so let's try to answer a couple more, and then we'll just get this thing wrapped up. So let's see, what are the typical range of rates for short-term productions? So you see short-term productions are very, very interesting because the way that the system works that generates the quotes, it's based on production cost, number of days, and then what insurances you're buying. So it's not really like a rate, like a percentage. Like I said before, we have 1.5 to 2%. That's really gonna vary. So let's see. Can insurance be used on music projects? Absolutely. Just like filming a music video, right? Just like feature film, you have similar exposures. You have people, so you need workers' comp, you have equipment, you have lighting, you could get shut down, have to go and rent another location. So absolutely can. Is substance abuse for a cast member ever enough to be denied coverage, or is it just a case of rising premiums? So substance abuse, when you do a cast medical, that person has a history of substance abuse, they will, it will come out during that cast medical process, right? So once the underwriter reviews the medical exam, or a lot of times we already know, right? We've been doing this a long time. They have files, we have files on people from other movies, and we kind of know who in the industry has issues. It's in the trades, right? They go to rehab once, they get out, they go back again, things like that. So sometimes it'll just be like a really high deductible, right? Or rising premiums, or both, or maybe if it's a really bad situation, maybe they will deny coverage, right? And say, sorry, we're not gonna quote this guy or person or individual. Let's see. Let's see. Is it more beneficial for production companies to invest in E&O policies to cover multiple projects and amortize the cost over insurance premiums across multiple? You could, right? You can get a blanket E&O depending on the type of projects. You cannot combine E&O for multiple feature films. So if you're doing like a lot of music videos, or a lot of like documentaries, a lot of commercials, that you could do it, but not typically for feature films. So, and then you would have to do the application, and then the rates would vary on that as well. See, young actors finding jobs. Oh, good luck. That's what I'm going to say there. The question was, for young actors, how do you find acting jobs in our cities or around the world? I have no idea. And if you find out, let me know, because there's 100,000 people in Los Angeles that are looking for the same thing. Next one, is there special insurance that you need when using children? No, but you need to provide a lot of information. There are certain workers' comp rules on working with minors, right? Like the parents are on set, they can only work certain hours, things like that. So you just have to disclose it to us at the time that we're quoting it, and we go from there. Let's see. How does insurance generally change as you cross borders, right? So your production package policy is worldwide, right? Except for places where the US has like trade sanctions and embargoes and things like that. But you buy a policy here and it will cover you anywhere in the world, right? When you go film abroad, depending on which country you're in, you may need to buy locally admitted insurance. And then in the US, you buy that foreign package policy that will go over and above what you buy locally in that country. Let's see, I'm just going to kind of skip around here. Let's see. Where the best place to apply? Start first with film. Okay. Let's see. Do bigger films like Sundance require you to have insurance? I do not know. They probably require you to have. The question is, do bigger film festivals like Sundance, Tribeca, etc., require you to have insurance? I'm not sure, but they probably require you to have E&O insurance. What's my email? My email is currently on the screen, I believe. It is Daniel_. My last name is spelled Rbibo @ajg.com. Let's see, reduce cost for insurance students. Okay, so for student films, there are no reduced costs, unfortunately. The truth is that you're actually higher risk than experienced filmmakers. So that would probably work in the reverse, if anything. Let's see, film industries and music industry, as far as residuals and royalties, I do not know. Let's see, there's that one, there's that one. Yes, so to be clear, when you go into production, the production company is responsible to pay the insurance premiums, period. When it comes to E&O, right? Sometimes, in some cases, a distributor will include in their distribution fee the cost for E&O. So they may pay, may offset it with their fees, whatever, but that's typically it. But the production company is the entity that is required for buying the insurance. Let's see, last question, and I think we'll end it off here. How do you ask for policy coverage information that affects you as a worker at your workplace, such as working at an arena or theater that hosts all year round? What if they won't tell you? You probably got to ask HR, right? Your human resources department should know what insurance that company has, what that entity has, what your employer has. And if you have specific questions about that, they should be able to help you with that. So I think that's it. Let's see, last one. Could we request a quote for a film in production in Puerto Rico? That's funny. I probably handle more insurance in Puerto Rico than any other broker, but yeah, you definitely can. Shoot me an email afterwards. Puerto Rico is very tricky because you got to buy a policy from an insurance company that's admitted in territory, right? And there's only really one insurance company that does that, so it's going to be more expensive. And then depending on when you're shooting, if it's during hurricane season, then it's going to be even more expensive. And then there's roughly around 9.75% taxes on top of the premium, so it is more expensive to shoot in Puerto Rico. But definitely would love to help you with it. Let me know. Shoot me an email, and that's it. I think that's it. So I'm going to stop sharing here. And let's see, is there anything else? I really think that's it. So if anybody has any more questions, feel free, shoot me an email, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can, and we'll go from there. All right, everyone. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for participating. Thanks for all the questions. That was great. Ton of questions. And that's it. So have a wonderful day, evening in New York, and we'll keep in touch. Thank you.